one can come to work, no one can work, and no one can get paid until you agree to my conditions. It's like the opposite of a strike. They want to work, they're not allowed to work until they agree to the boss's new conditions. In this situation, eventually, we're talking about, again, the 1880s, 1890s, the Industrial Revolution, we're getting factories are growing and the workers are being mistreated, the unsafe working conditions, long hours. What forms are called labor unions. A collective group of workers all come together and decide to use their power, and they create labor unions in which they elect leaders, and those leaders or representatives then negotiate with the owners. 150 factory workers can't go and yell at the boss. That logistically, that technically cannot work. Imagine, and you've probably seen this in a classroom, you've probably seen this in the school. If the entire 8th grade is upset about something and they want to go and talk to the principal, all of you can't go at once because it turns into madness. And one guy's yelling something and they're screaming and they're yelling and nothing gets across. No messages, there's no communication. It's a disaster. What you need to do is, as an 8th grade or a 7th grade or a 12th grade, or as a labor union, you elect a leader, a representative, and you give your power to that person, and that person will work on your behalf. And so then that leader goes and meets with the owner, and they try to negotiate. Can we get less hours? Can we get safer conditions? Can we get raises? Also, those leaders will bypass the owner at times and then go straight to the government. Instead of 100 or 200 factory workers rushing to Washington, D.C. Again, logistically, technically, you can't do that. Mechanically, it's not possible. But what is possible is to send 2 or 3 leaders to Washington, D.C. to explain to our lawmakers, we need a law that says you can only work so many hours a day. We need a law that says when Mr. Dietrich spills coffee on the floor, you got to put a yellow sign that says, oh my God, watch out for the coffee or we're all going to die. Holy no, there's coffee on the floor. You need safety restrictions. You need safety restrictions. Now, sometimes we go over the top with that. For example, if there's a little bit of water on the ground, you got to put that big yellow sign up or else someone might slip and die. Labor union goals. So again, the labor union negotiates with the owners for the workers. The labor union also explains or expresses desires to the government. Goal number 1. The labor unions said that what the workers want and need is an 8-hour workday. 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for leisure, and 8 hours for work. 24-hour day. You can sleep, you can enjoy your life, and then 8 hours for work. No more 24 hours of work. We need rest, we need to have a life, and then we can work. 8 hours. Number 2, we want arbitration. Arbitration. What's with these funny words? So arbitration is simply, we want a referee, we want a judge, we want an impartial not negotiator, basically an independent official. Independent, meaning this person, the referee, so this is the worker, this is the owner, so this is the independent arbiter. An independent judge. He does not like this guy. He does not work for this guy. He doesn't work for anybody. He listens to this guy's argument. He listens to this guy's argument. And then he decides, all right, here's what we're going to do. And so the workers wanted this. They wanted an independent official that would work like a judge. Kind of like when you go to court and you defend yourself or someone defends themselves. There's a judge, listens to all the facts, and then makes the decision. The workers wanted this. They wanted an opportunity to say, here's what's going on. Someone needs to make a decision because the owner is always going to make a decision that supports the owner. They want someone that's going to look at all the facts and make a impartial or an unbiased decision. And then number 3, they want government regulation. The government can no longer be laissez-faire. They need to get involved. They cannot be completely hands-off. Charlie is, no, it's not Charlie. Willy Wonka is killing kids. Willy Wonka is drowning kids. He's turning them into gumballs. They're getting stuck in pipes. You need to have some sort of regulation that says, hey, you need to stand 3 feet away from the chocolate river. We need a regulation that says you're not, like at least a warning sign that says, if you eat this gumball, you're going to turn into a gumball. They need some regulations. They need some warning signs. Someone has to make the boss do this because if the boss isn't forced to do it, he's not going to do it. Now, we can argue that you don't need to do that because, again, if Willy Wonka has a dangerous facility, People were going to realize, oh yeah, that's where 5 guys died last week. You know where I'm not going to work? For Willy Wonka. That's one theory. The laissez-faire economics of Adam Smith, mentioned in Wealth of Nations, which we talked about in a couple of videos ago. In that theory, under that principle, the idea is like the government doesn't have to get involved because people will know that's a dangerous place to work. I don't want to work there. And eventually, Mr. Wonka is going to have to put up signs on his own. Mr. Wonka is going to have to make his place safer to attract future employees. Or what Mr. Wonka is going to have to do is just simply pay people more, because that exists today. There are still dangerous jobs all across the country. There are dangerous work environments everywhere. And what the boss has to do, like for example, if you want to work on an oil rig or you want to work on Deadliest Catch, those are very dangerous jobs. People die, they get arms broken, they get injured. You know how they attract people? They can't make it any safer. When you're on a boat in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and there's a storm coming and there's giant waves and crabs are snapping at you, you can't really make it any. I can't say, hey, crabs, could you guys take it easy? Please, I'm trying to make these safe working conditions. You can't do that. You can't tell, ocean, can you calm down a little bit? You can't control the ocean. So what a boss has to do in that situation is pay people more. That is an example of Adam Smith laissez-faire economics. You don't need the government to regulate it. You just simply pay people more, like, all right, I'll do it. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to give it a chance. If I die, I die, but I'm going to make them bags. They say, no, that's not the way it works. You need the government to get involved. You need the government to regulate. You need the government to say, these machines need to be safe. They need to be tested. The factory has to be cleaned out every once in a while. You need signs everywhere. You name the regulation. You've seen them in anywhere you go. If you've ever had a job, you've seen the signs up printed everywhere. That's because the government regulates that business and has controlled those machines and made them safe. Those are the 3 goals of the labor unions. So as we go into the 20th century, 1880s, 1890s, labor unions are getting strong. The factories are growing. There's more workers in these unsafe conditions, realizing that we need to do something. So they're starting to make these strong labor unions. It's getting more members, and as they get more members, they get stronger. Right? They're happy now. Look, I look at this like, oh gosh. And I tried to find a picture of there really aren't any pictures of labor unions happy, because if you Google up labor unions, they're always protesting. And when they're protesting, they're always angry or sad. And you literally can't find a really good picture of labor unions happy and strong. And so hey, yeah! Their eyes are still a little bit sad, but I can't really do anything about that. I should have put googly eyes on. The Great Railroad Strike, 1877. All right, this is the part of the lesson where we talk about specific examples. So hopefully up until this point, you've been able to evaluate the effectiveness of labor strategies. Did the labor strikes work? Did the lockouts work? Could they work in a certain situation? Are they always doomed to fail? Be able to evaluate whether they can or can't work and why, and give examples. So we're going to talk about the railroad strike of 1877. We've got these hard-working railroad workers, and then eventually the boss says, you know what we're going to do? He cuts wages by 10%. The workers get upset. The workers go on strike. And as you know, a railroad is kind of like a road, and like roads, they go places. And this railroad stretched across 5 states. And so you can see here, this railroad strike was pretty much, you might as well say it was a nationwide strike. When it takes up that many states, it's kind of a big deal. They're all striking because they were forced to accept lower wages, and they did not want a 10% wage. So one of the things that happens with the strike is because the men are angry and they're upset and they're protesting. And eventually, like in many strikes, violence breaks out. And the President Hayes, has to send in the military to stop the strikers and to stop the violence. In result, 100 people die. 100 people die. The workers are forced first to go back to work and accept the lower wages. Basically, the government comes to the side of the boss. Winning. I made this back when Charlie Sheen was a thing, and he used to say winning. And you probably have no idea who Charlie Sheen is. So this PowerPoint is kind of old now. Haymarket Square. So again, labor unions are doing well. Well, not here. The labor union tried to go on strike. Violence erupts. The government comes in and enough of that. Back to work, you nuts. The Haymarket Square, 1886. This is a labor organization, labor union, and the workers are together to celebrate and to express their power, and they come together as a sign of solidarity and that, yes, we are strong and we're going to get changes. And then someone throws a bomb in the middle of this meeting. It blows up. How many people died? Let me look at the numbers here. The Haymarket Square. Well, I don't have the specific numbers of people dying. But nonetheless, the end result of this, well, they blame anarchists for it. So it's kind of complicated, and there aren't any real true answers to who threw the bomb and why did they throw the bomb. They found some guys that had been making bombs, and they were anarchists who wanted to overthrow the government and wanted to change, and they were kind of linked to outside countries, and so that kind of created this idea of xenophobia, and people were real leery of German immigrants and Bohemian immigrants, and they said, oh, we can't trust them because they threw the bomb, so you kind of got that angle, but it's not completely sure. The end result, though, was you had this bomb blew up. There was craziness. There was chaos. The government had to get involved. And so half the country looks at this and says, those stupid labor unions, look at those idiots. They're blowing up. They're causing a fuss. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of all this chaos. I just want law and order. I just want a normal city. I want a normal life. Why don't those guys get it together? And so one of the results of this bomb was to create some anger and hatred and hurt the labor unions. And on the other side, the people who were part of labor unions looked at this and said, no, we've got to stay together. We've got to get stronger. People are trying to disrupt us. They know we're powerful. That's why they're messing with us. We didn't throw a bomb in our own meeting. We didn't try to blow up ourselves. They, whoever they are, was it the bosses? Was it the anarchists? Was it the government? We don't know. And we don't know today who specific was behind this, but we know someone's trying to stop us because they know we're powerful. So on one hand, you can say it made the labor union stronger, but it also kind of turned a lot of the country against the labor union. And we see this plays out a lot in American history where people are striking, they're protesting, Black Lives Matter, or against police brutality. People are striking in a city and something goes wrong, or someone breaks into a building, or someone shatters a business and someone robs a business during the protest, and the protest kind of gets confused because you got the protesters doing the right thing, but then there's a couple guys that aren't doing the right thing and they mess up, and then people look at the guys that mess up and say, look, it's all a mess. Why don't you guys just stop? So it's one of these perfect examples of it helps destroy the movement and it helps destroy this cause. We see this all the time. It's a perfect little ploy. Sometimes the government's involved. Sometimes there's secret organizations involved. They're trying to break up the protest. They're trying to break up the movement. And what they want to do is make the movement look bad. And this looks bad when you got this bomb that blows up during a middle of a meeting. It makes them look bad. And so a lot of people in the country are like, oh, those guys, they need to get together. And we see this with protests all the time. Now, the bigger question is, who's behind this? Was this the government? Was this the owners that planted the bomb to make this thing look like this? We don't know. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Why would the labor union blow up the labor union? Why would these anarchists just randomly, why do the anarchists care? Do they really have the motivation? Or does this sound like someone who was connected to the bosses? Because we've already talked about it before where the bosses, the owners had used the military, but they'd also used the police to break up strikes. And some people believe that that secret police known as the Pinkertons, which we'll talk about in a second, the Pinkertons planted the bomb because they were hired by the business owners or the elite ruling class to break up the labor movement. A lot of question marks. No one really knows specifically what happened at Haymarket Square, but we know the end result. A lot of the country started to not like the labor movement, whereas the people within the labor movement got stronger. Homestead Strike, 1892. Homestead Steel Mill owned by Andrew Carnegie. We talked about Andrew Carnegie the other day and his vertical integration monopoly. Remember, he owns all the different parts of the process of turning the iron ore rocks into steel. Well, in the steel plant where they make the steel, he decides, yeah, I'm going to cut your wages by 20%. What? So, of course, but it gets worse. Wait. Cuts the wages by 20%. But that's not all, folks. He also locks out anyone that is a union work. Oh, you belong to a union. Okay, so you right there, Steve, he's not a union, cutting his salary. You, Bill, you're part of a union. You're locked out. You can't come to work. I'm not paying you. Go home until you quit the union. Then you can come back, and you can come back with a 20% pay cut. So that means a double whammy.